Hi there, my name's John Cook, and I want to talk to you for about 30 minutes about giving you an introduction to Open Educational Resources, or OERs. It's part of the Education in the Digital Age lecture series. These slides are available as a PDF as well, because there are lots of links in here that you can follow, but I won't have time to go through them all. So these slides and this screencast is a resource to be followed up. So briefly, here I'm teaching at the university for the last 2 years. I'm in my third year now. Here are some of the summer courses I do, the winter courses. Do feel free to follow up if they look interesting. The structure of this talk, I'll be in this screencast, I'll be looking at the first 3 points here, which I won't read out because I'm going to introduce each part, each third, as we go along, and then the fourth part is an exercise for you to do, which is quite interesting, Google Lens, which are more on that at the end. So, part 1 of 3 for this screencast. Overview of Open Solutions Movement I'm about to give you, and a definition of OER. So, a good place to get these definitions from is the UNESCO website. OERs has become a kind of a worldwide movement with big players in the USA, the UK and Africa and so on and so forth. Open educational resources are teaching, learning and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation and redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions. So open licenses, got an arrow there, coming back to it. OERs form part of the open solutions alongside free and open source software, open access, open data and crowdsourcing platforms. So open source software, you might be familiar with Android, which many phones run on, is open source software, although some of its parts of it are closed down, but you can get parts of Android are open source. Another example is Linux. It's a big open source software that you might be familiar with. So we're part of the open solutions movement. Open this, open that, which is quite an important thing around the world. Here's some good ideas about what makes good OERs. It's findable, clearly described, clearly licensed. That word again comes from a trusted source, for example a university. Easily modified, freestanding, copyright free, it's recommended by someone, it may be imperfect. This is kind of an idealized list. I like this diagram. It's trying to give you an idea of what is an OER life cycle. By looking at how they come about and are used and reused, it makes it clearer what they are. Here's the reference at the bottom to where it comes from, the JISC website. So we're trying to use cow's milk. So there's the producer of the cow's milk is like an OER. These slides, this screencast is I'm the producer and the owner of these, but the university might be the owner as well. I'm not sure. The producer is the cow, produces this open educational resource, a carton of milk. This is delivered by truck to a repository. Now there's the owner somewhere in there who owns the cows and the farmer. So what happens next is these repositories, the churns of milk, cartons of milk are distributed. A cat might be distributed via a supermarket. Get a cat, will get some milk to drink. It might be remixed with other resources to give you a milkshake. It might be exchanged with other resources to be repurposed. So you might get an outcome might be a cake. So that's just to give you a brief idea of the life cycle of where they come from, producers, owners, and sharing and remixing. David Wiley came up with a nice set of what are called the 5 freedoms of OERs, where we can retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute them. I won't go into the definitions of them, but if we take remixing them, which was in my diagram above, here. So remixing is the right to combine the original or revised content with other content to create something new, e.g. incorporate the content into a mashup. And when I was working on a Learning Les project, we took a mobile phone app for learning produced by Aachen University, one of the partners, developed by Helsinki, and we used it to develop we tweaked it with a programmer to produce something else. And these were pulled out of and deposited in something called GitHub, which is the biggest, a huge repository of open source software. So there's my definitions of open educational resources. I'm now on to the second third of the talk, types and examples of OERs. And I think this is a nice talk you can follow upon. There's the link, but this slide is from there. If you notice, I'm always trying to attribute the origins of all the resources I'm using. Types of OERs are presentation slides, like these slides, podcasts, syllabi, images, lesson plans, lecture videos, maps, worksheets, textbooks, and so on. That gives you a good starting point to think about what types of OERs there are. So OERs are a strategic opportunity to improve knowledge sharing, capacity building, and universal access to quality learning and teaching resources. That's the WWN Action Plan 2017. And there is a huge demand around the world for high quality, affordable educational opportunities, but a very limited supply. Here are some well-known OERs. You can go to this, get the PDF, click on this link, and you'll see a huge list of initiatives on Wikipedia. But what I want to focus in on is Wikipedia itself, which is an open educational resource. In the early days, it was prone to having strange information on. People would make kind of humorous edits and malicious edits. But over the years, it's developed into quite a respectable resource, where it typically is quite, when you go to learn how to do a project in the garden, or if I want to look up what an author said, or sometimes a philosopher, it is actually quite good because you get these editors who are in charge of the pages, and you do get something called editor wars, but they, between these people who think it should be this or it should be that, but something usually comes out of it that's very useful. It's one of the big success stories of the internet, as we'll see in a minute. So here's a critical view by its creator, Jimmy Wales, because Wikipedia had its 20th birthday on 15th of January of this year. So he's on the BBC talking about it. So I'm going to click on this. It's a 1-minute short clip.
Really, it's about small group collaboration. It's about empowering the best people in the community so they have the power to control their environment. And so it isn't a wide open free-for-all and an anarchy. It never was, really. It just sounds like it couldn't possibly work, but actually it works all right. What we always say is Wikipedia is a fantastic starting point, but if you really want to understand something, it's just a starting point. It gets you oriented. You know, if I wanted to know more about a country where I hear there's some big controversy or crisis, it'd be fantastic if I go to Wikipedia and read the basic political landscape there. But I wouldn't be an expert, but I would probably have a bit more nuanced understanding of the Today program.
Nice clip on the news about that. Just close that down. Otherwise you're going to be able to read my Facebook posts. I was the manager of a big open educational resource initiative in about 16 years ago, the Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning in Reusable Learning Objects. Partners were, I was from London Met, we were the lead partner. Partners were Cambridge University and Nottingham. We had it ended up being about £4 million from the UK government, funding over 3 to 4 years. It was 3 years mainly. And we were looking at improving student learning experience and achievement, and looking into reuse, evaluation of high quality reusable learning objects. They were in such areas as in Nottingham in nursing, at Cambridge for engineering, for language learning, and at London Met for language learning again, and for sports, science, and business studies, and many other areas. Quite an interesting area. We had a staff reward program as part of it, which was quite innovative, which meant we'd go to some of the Cambridge colleges and have slap-up meals, as well as having project meetings. And here's, 14 years ago, this is the first time I was ever tagged on Facebook by my friend and colleague Debbie Holly, and there's me and some of my colleagues down at the college in Cambridge before dinner. I don't usually dress that smart. Bill Gates had a lot to say about open courseware, which is the big MIT initiative. I'll just give you the first minute or so of this, so you get a flavour of what he's got to say, because he's obviously the co-founder of Microsoft Software, got a big charitable foundation. Interesting what he's got to say. Over 10 years ago.
We need stories. We need stories to understand ourselves.
Let's get rid of this advert.
We are the only...
And the other thing I think is using technology. And here's a case where MIT's absolutely been at the forefront. Open courseware, there's great numbers in terms of how much it's being used by millions of people. I'm a super happy user. I retook physics with Walter Lewin. I took Professor Sadoway's course and loved that. I recommend it to everybody. Eric Lander, biology, refresher on differential equations. Actually, of the 33 that they have videos, I've taken 11. And I just last night spotted 2 new ones that I need to take. So just for me, it's a good thing. But this is just the beginning, it's MIT did spark a lot of people to do similar things. But the percentage of people using these things and the difficulty of finding something and testing your knowledge, really bringing the best of video, the best professors in the world, have interactive experiments, interactive ways of testing your knowledge, even accreditation, have a way that if you have gathered this knowledge, instead of that all coming bundled with the degree where you had to be somewhere for 4 years, fairly expensive, say $250,000, actually have the accreditation piece be separated out so you can have innovation in terms of how people acquire the knowledge and separate it from place-based learning.
There you go listen to that if you want to hear more. And then there are links to all sorts of other useful resources in that area. So Bill Gates, over 10 years ago, seeing how important OERs are with the COVID pandemic and people having to learn from home again, as you will have been and you are now. I should be in Frankfurt really seeing students face to face, but I can't again this year. Unfortunately, schools around the world, higher education, people in the workplace are working at a distance. So OERs have become pretty important again. So if you're watching this, it's quite a topical subject. So big issues. I'm on the last part of the Screencast. I'm going to look at how OERs can improve education across the globe and some key issues and the occasional drawback. Oops, sorry, wrong way. This is bound to happen. So OERs can help improve education across the globe. This is a claim. I think it can. They are important for lifelong learning as well as for developing countries where many students may not be able to afford textbooks, where access to classrooms may be limited, and where teacher training programs may be lacking. They are also important in wealthy industrialized nations, countries, where we can offer significant cost savings. So they are good to use in an argument with your manager, which I have done in the past. Educational systems across the world are being challenged to become more inclusive, though, to increase the quality of learning provision, to be more responsive to the requirements of society and the economy. And as such, UNESCO have come up with this report, which I'm referencing at the end, with these key trends. The importance of licensing, which I'll come back to in a second. The importance of technical openness. How does one resource play on a different platform, like a mobile phone, a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, so on and so forth, even a television. reducing barriers to learning opportunities for undeserved groups. That means populations which are disadvantaged, either through health or through economic concerns. So reducing the cost of access to education is important, as Bill Gates was pointing out in that clip I played you. Improving the relevance of learning content to individual needs. How do we adapt to people so that the learning is more effective? And providing multilingual and localized content, so that's relevant to the actual cultural needs of where it's being used. Say if that was in Africa, it would be different to if that was in Southeast Asia. There's a tension with copyright law, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, I just have to show you it briefly, but what they've come up with is called the Creative Commons. This is a big thing. You'll see these symbols on lots of the resources as open education resources. You might have seen them before. These are where the copyright holder can use these in combination to determine how they would like to see their intellectual property used. So there's lots of different types. Share alike, that's quite a common one. You'll see that on quite a few resources. So the Creative Commons was a great idea, and it's a public domain-like dedication called CC0 enables owners of copyright protected material content that if I own the copyright, I waive all my copyrights in my works, thereby placing them as completely as possible in the public domain so that others may freely build upon, enhance and reuse the works for any purposes without restriction under copyright or database law. So this is a big thing, and it's been around for some time. So OERs present an opportunity to increase access to high quality learning materials whilst allowing materials to be adapted and contextualized for specific regions, regional purposes, or through open licensing, Creative Commons for example. Of course, free availability or lower development costs make OER an alternative to consider for large-scale deployment. It certainly can cut costs if used correctly. So OERs are about improving teaching and learning through allowing open access to learning materials that can be shared and adapted by others, but OERs thereby help provoke the creative use of resources by teachers and learners. So there's this idea that it should be creative for teachers and learners to get hold of them, not just prescriptive, whether it be formal education for pre-primary or to doctoral studies, or for adults undertaking training for work, doing on-the-job training, or participating in lifelong learning. Here's one good example, another one we've heard of, the MIT one, the Open University from my country. I'm based in the UK. They've got something called Open Learn. And with some of my students on the Open Education Resources module, it says you can create your own open educational resources, but it's a bit clunky, but it's certainly, that's the actual creation mechanism. The actual platform's not clunky, it's used quite extensively by the Open University. In the UK, the Association for Learning Technology, which I used to be the president of, does have a big conference on open education resources, still going strong, and if you went to that you could look at the different resources that have, in fact we will. I've just realised I'm doing quite well on time. I'm trying to keep this to 30 minutes. So here's the website, and what you look at these themes for the upcoming conference are openness, care and joy in a time of pandemic, interesting topic. Open educational responses to surveillance technologies and data ownership, so privacy is a big issue there, and privacy comes up in the part 4, which you'll do on your own, which is an exercise using Google Lens. Open in action, open teaching education practices, shifts in agency, empowering the learner, that's a big thing, has been for years, but it's becoming, it's really important that we get active learning, learner-centered learning, so on and so forth. And open source tools, some tools that allow you to do things in the cloud, say, in a targeted way. So there's a conference coming up. Get your papers in. I haven't submitted anything. Here are all the references. So I'm doing well. So I think I've been keeping this quite short. I've cited all the references. This is the one I've used the most. What I want you to point you to now, with the time that's left, I think I've been talking at the end of this for about 25 minutes, so it gives you plenty of time to do this exercise. see the separate handout for the Google Lens activity. It doesn't. Google Lens is available on Android and iOS, but so it doesn't fully fit the UNESCO definition of OER. But it raises key issues like privacy issues and ethical issues. But it is available to use. But it's just that it's not, the licensing is a bit different to what we might expect from open educational resources. But anybody can use it. But in my classes, what we do, we usually for the first year face to face, we do in groups, and then online when we did it last winter semester, we did it in groups using Zoom. So what I've got is when you go to the activity handout, which is a separate handout, do the activity first before you look at the last 5 pages. This lets you know, because the last 5 pages let you know what my students thought. So you can compare your notes. You'll be asked to keep some notes when you're using this app as you go around the library, the campus, if you can get access to them. Don't know about that. Or if you can go around the streets, around your house, and there's a list of 5 questions in there for you to answer. It's pretty good fun. My students always have great fun. I hope you will too. It advises you in the handout to maybe do it with someone, or if not, do it on your own. But then when you've made a note of all your answers to the questions, compare your answers to the ones my students have come up with. There's no right answers often, but thank you. Good luck with it. And if you want to email me, if you have any questions or observations, there's my email address there. So, and that's it from me. Thank you very much. Over to you for your active learning sort of exercise.